Mary and Susan, as service providers, can you tell us just a bit about your introduction to the Human Trafficking Intervention Court? Susan, do you want to start?
Oh, okay. To piggyback right on Leigh, clients are given all these choices. They could go to classes, they could choose to go to trial, or they could plead guilty and then pay a fine and to go home. But lately, we've been hearing a lot from clients also about going to trial. Because I started out in 2014 and start to encounter women arrested for prostitution who are seen as potential victims. But then at that time, I saw this as a mass arrest because we just got a data from Judge Zarita a few weeks ago that there was, just Queens alone, there was 1,026 arrests just that year alone. And the room, the courtroom is at times were during that year was flooded with defendants, and then and of course everybody wants to have the easy way out to just to go to classes. But nowadays, more clients are asking about why can't we go to trial? Because there's a feeling of disempowerment, of getting arrested. And not knowing what's the protocol of the arrest, and not knowing why they're arrested, or not knowing that they're actually being treated as victims. So so that's the question that we're asking now, more from the clients, if I may add.
So Womenkind, we were formerly called New York Asian Women's Center, and at the time, as Leigh had mentioned, we were pretty much taking referrals since 2009, around 2009. And, at that time, there were only just small groups of women, and we were there to fill a need because capacity-wise, we had a lot of Asian language speaking counselors. So it's kind of morphed now to where the intervention courts serve more of as a way for us to provide advocacy too, because we are seeing what the women are seeing. They're reflecting the reality of their lives. It may not necessarily rise to human trafficking, but it has risen to other forms of exploitation like domestic violence, sexual violence as well. So, these are ways now that we are trying to think through, and obviously also work very much with the clients to hear from them and see what are the best resources for them at the time.
Yeah, Leigh, you mentioned when you started that it was predominantly young women. Susan, could I start with you in asking to contextualize this a bit about the Asian migrant community you are working with? Can you share the sense of why these individuals are getting into this kind of work, what's bringing them here, the demographics you're seeing currently?
These women are, let me just explain that our agency, we mainly work with Chinese foreign nationals, and so almost all of our clients are Chinese women who are either victims or potential victims. So far we have worked with about 500 of them. So about a quarter of them we have identified as trafficking victims. Most of them are middle-aged. I think Leigh mentioned that earlier. And many of them come here all by themselves in their 40s. That was very curious to me. I have many clients describe to me that they just get off the plane, with their luggage, and they walk on the street of Flushing, Queens, and they start to look for a place to stay. And then many of them, from our data, about 43% have experienced domestic violence, and about 60% they have experienced sexual assault. And they come here to look for better economic opportunities. They often have family members waiting in China for them to send back money. So the reason that they come here mainly is to find work and to also many of them express that is to how do you say this, to escape or to get away from either bad marriages or domestic violence when they were in China. And then when they get here, either they learn about the profession when they were in China about massage, and then they get in touch with an agent in China who promised them work, but then when they flew over and landed in America, sometimes they are actually driven to a brothel, or they are driven to a massage parlor where they actually offer illicit massage, commercial sex, or actually majority of them, they get themselves into that situation while they were trying to find work locally when they come to the United States. Sometimes through word of mouth, because massage is so prevalent in the Asian community, and many of them have already gone through multiple types of jobs. They're working in restaurants, they're working in nail salons, they are domestic workers, and they work long hours with little pay, and somehow people give them suggestions or they get tricked, and that's how it happens. Yeah.
And I think I kind of want to focus a lot more on the lack of economic opportunity as well that our clients face, because as a person that had also provided services to those who have faced mainly labor trafficking, I continue to see parallels between this community as migrant workers too, and with those who have been labor trafficked, whether they're domestic workers or whether they're teachers. So, I do want to stress that lack of economic opportunity back in their home country as being one of the drivers. And also, a lot of times people need to survive. So they need to make money. And this is the immigrant narrative since the history of this country. And as Susan said, massage has also been very much part of the countries they're coming out of. They massage their family members. They massage each other. It's a form of wellness. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it should be too much of a surprise that people are finding this kind of work instead of, let's say, going into agricultural work. Because if it's prevalent there, people will find more job opportunities and it's less rigorous. And they're inside, they're indoors. So these are some of the parallels we're seeing.
And I think we should just for those of you who may not know, that in New York State, you're required to have a license to perform massage. It's considered a professional, it's considered a profession that requires a license. And the licensing requirements are pretty rigorous, and it also requires that the person have legal status in the United States. So right away, immigrants, particularly coming from these countries where massage is a part of their life and their culture, they're not aware of these licensing requirements. And they get, I think, tricked into applying for these jobs and being told that you can make a lot of money and you can use my license while you learn. Mm-hmm. And they don't have any they don't have any way of knowing that this is not the way it works in the United States. And they're shocked when they are arrested for engaging in something that they don't consider to be illegal and have been told, in fact, it's legal to do and it's a legal job. And then the final thing that I want to say is, as Susan said, there was in 2014, 2015, through early 2017, there was a really big push of policing of massage parlors in New York City. And as we saw that, some people just arrested for unlicensed massage, but also arrested for unlicensed massage and prostitution. As we saw those numbers increase, those cases started coming through the human trafficking intervention courts and really increased the numbers of cases that we saw come through.
Well, yeah, that's a good sort of segue into my next question, which was, can you continue to expand on sort of when you started seeing the disconnects between, what perceived policy was and actual policy was, and what was actually playing out in human trafficking intervention court? Like particularly when we started seeing in 2014, 2015, some of the headlines of of the increased raids in massage parlors, where how was the impact of law enforcement actually playing out in your eyes from what?
So honestly, I really don't know what the policy was that drove that. I would ask the prosecutor. I was working in the Queen's Court at that time as the assigned attorney from our project, and I would ask the prosecutor on a regular basis, like, what is fueling this? Why are they arresting so many individuals? Why are they raiding all these massage parlors? And the only response that I got was, community complaints, and that there didn't seem to be any really broader purpose or goal other than to just make the community feel better that they were making arrests. And while that might have made some segment of, maybe the mayor's office feel like they were addressing people's needs by having these special courts that connected people to services, I think that it's a mistake to underestimate the trauma of person faces being arrested, and also the long-term impact of an arrest. Even if you're not convicted of something, particularly if you're an immigrant, it doesn't matter that you haven't been convicted. As Suzanne said earlier, you have to report any arrest if you are applying for some type of legal immigration remedy. So, while it's great, and as a defense attorney and a long-time defense attorney, it's great to be able to tell clients, oh, you won't get a criminal record as a result of this. It's not really satisfying to have to talk to a client about to be able to say that to them, given the fact that they've gone through this traumatic experience that they often don't understand, and they don't know why they're there.
Do you want to add anything to that, Mary?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can't really point to a policy per se that had driven a lot of this, but yeah, I probably just want to echo pretty much everything that Leigh said, and yeah. Sorry.
How has, I guess I could start with you, Susan. How has perception of law enforcement in the wake of that changed among your clients?
I don't see there's any change. I think when we talk about disconnect, I have always seen a disconnect between HTIC and law enforcement. It's a dilemma. I think somebody said it's a catch-21, that so far, I guess that the quickest way to finding victims is through law enforcement. And almost all of our clients, they have met with law enforcement. But it was, I think I mentioned this earlier in a stakeholder meeting, that a very little percentage of them were identified by law enforcement. Only those who were rescued from out of state, like rescue operations, and then victims were sent to us. So what I want to add is that when we talk about trauma, they rarely talk about, the experience of being trafficked, because the concept is just too foreign to them. When we talk about trauma, a lot of times in our counseling sessions, they talk about their arrest experience. And I think nowadays, NYPDs are getting a little bit better. Since the service providers, we have been voicing out about how unpleasant the arrest experience is, and I think, but still that when we worked with NYPD to actually visit these massage parlors and actually have conversations with the PDs, there's still a lot of judgments and also a lot of stigmas around these women. And I used to have, to be very honest, I used to have a lot of anger when I started, hearing the stories about their interactions. But nowadays, I don't want to be enemies with anybody, because I really believe in collaboration, and I really want to really learn how to work with law enforcement, because for now, maybe I'm just too stuck on this. Like, that's like a major referral source, or maybe Leigh or Mary could correct me. There are other better ways to finding victims. But right now, my heart is really, how can we work better with you, since you are the ones who are always bumping into these women first. Yeah.
And Mary, is that something you've found as well?
So there's definitely a struggle with working with law enforcement in that at this point, what they do is they have our information and then they'll give our information to the survivor if he or she chooses to call us. And for us, that's a lot of the self-determination approach that we have for our work, and it's what guides our work. So it's tough because, on the one hand, obviously, even during basic safety planning, you're saying things like call 911. And if that's something that a client is uncomfortable with, we wouldn't obviously force that on them. So we strive to do more work in collaboration with, the police, but we're also obviously very much on the side of our clients. So whatever they want to do is where we're going to go. Saying that a lot of our ways that we're referred, even through the intervention courts, is actually word of mouth through community members. So they'll be the ones telling each other. And nationally, we've been getting referrals as well because it's kind of this snowball effect or domino effect or whatever the research term is that, they're hearing about us from, Louisiana, and then they're living in Queens. So they're coming to us because they had heard about us, either through another community member or a lawyer had heard about us. So those are some of the ways that we're actually making connections with communities.
And so we talked a little bit about this on our call, and Leigh, I'd like to start with you, but just in the past 2 years since we saw news clips of ICE agents targeting individuals in human trafficking intervention court, how has your relationships with some of the clients that Susan and Mary might work with changed in the last 2 years for your team and other legal providers, in your opinion?
So I wouldn't say that our relationships with our clients have changed, but the way that we've had to advise them has changed. And actually, at the panel before, when Gonzalo and Amy were talking about, kind of their perceptions, and Amy was saying that you have to make relationships with federal law enforcement, and Gonzalo was saying that part of the issue is the unpredictability of what's happening. And it just struck me that we're in a time period where we're in this really bad relationship, right? And it's almost like domestic violence, we think we know what should happen, but we never know when something bad might happen. And so it's hard to advise clients, and it's also hard to give them any kind of comfort that you can predict what their experience is going to be. So, one thing that we really worry about after it was disclosed that ICE was coming to court, and they're, coming to courthouses throughout New York City, and in our project, we kind of felt safe, ICE will never come to the human trafficking intervention court and try to detain someone who's potentially a trafficking victim. And then we were, faced flatly with an experience where ICE agents were waiting in the hallway of the courthouse to detain our client. And luckily, we were able to negotiate that situation and make it so that our client didn't get detained that day. But we found out later that 2 clients had been detained after they left the courthouse a week prior, and we've had other clients detained since. So it's really scary, and we have to try to get a lot more information from our clients that we might not have asked for right at the beginning of a relationship. When you're trying to develop a relationship, it's hard to get people to confide in you about very intimate, personal things, and also, any talk of immigration is scary to particularly undocumented clients, but even, clients who are documented, because they're really worried about how an arrest is going to impact their status. So we've had to really jump into those questions and get that information so that we can make an analysis of whether someone's even safe coming to court. And what's scary is that unpredictability, because we're seeing clients detained who have no criminal record. We hear the rhetoric of, we're looking for serious criminals, then the policy changes to, anyone who's been arrested. And then what we're finding is that ICE has access to arrest information, and they put it through their system, and what appears, this is really anecdotal, but what appears to me is they are finding people who they can easily deport with the least amount of effort on their part, and those are the people that they're targeting. And those are sometimes our clients who are here on a tourist visa, or they're here from a visa waiver country, and it's very easy to basically undocument those people and get them quickly deported.
I'm curious, what came of the clients that were detained in those cases?
The three that we know of were deported very quickly. And we heard of other clients that we didn't represent that were also detained, and I think one or two of them were able to eventually get a bond, and I don't know what their status is now.
So has this impacted the rates at which clients are actually showing up to court dates?
So I did a very unscientific survey of the cases in Queens that Legal Aid has represented, and I've been doing this work since 2012. And from 2012 through 2016, I had 5 clients warrant, which means they failed to appear in court, and the judge issued a warrant for their arrest because they didn't appear. So that's a really low number just in general. So not to stereotype or anything, but Chinese clients, Asian clients are very good about coming to court. Like if they don't come, it's very unusual. Then starting in February of 2017, so over the 4 years, 5 people warranted. Since February of 2017, 6 clients have failed to appear in court and have had warrants issued for their arrest. So in the period of 18 months, there have been more people have failed to appear in court. And then we've had the clients who've been detained, who at least we were able to identify, had been detained through witnesses who saw that happening, and we were able to force the prosecutor to find out what happened to those clients, and we were able to avoid warrants on those cases, and those cases were dismissed. But we don't know what happened with the others. Were they afraid to come, or were they detained and were put into proceedings, and we don't know.
Yeah, Mary, could I just throw it to you to speak about the same time period that Leigh is talking about and your clients' perceptions?
In about 2 years, really one of the shifts in narratives that we've heard from clients is that, there was always this fear of law enforcement and ICE. That has been part of the community for forever. But there was an increase, a lot of the client sessions became, what do we do if they come? What do we do if they're knocking on our door? So a lot of that actually filtered into the client sessions and safety planning. What are your rights? How do you prepare yourself and families if you are, in a sense, taken? So there was a lot of this rhetoric that was happening too back in 2016. And then the other, real shift that we had seen was, so clients were telling us basically that they are more afraid of ICE, basically, than an abusive client coming in or somebody that comes and tries to rob the massage business. So that kind of shift was very telling for us because it really showed that, they were willing to almost face another kind of harm over ICE.
I think clients, very much like what Mary just said, they start to cling to us. For those who are able to build trust with us, they start to cling to their counselors, so this to Garden of Hope, more about legal advice. about deportation and immigration questions. And we do have, before Trump became president, there was already a fear. And then when he became president, we didn't think really that's going to happen, like people are going to be arrested. But then we started to have all these Know Your Rights workshops inside our agency. And then, from 2016 to now, we do have 3 clients who were detained by ICE, and all from QHTIC, from Queens Human Trafficking Intervention Corps. And what we learned from our clients that although they came to our workshop, they heard how to do safety planning, and they know, they were told how to respond, but on the spot, right outside, either outside of the courthouse or wherever they have encountered an ICE officer, they kind of just freeze, or they kind of just like told them, oh yes, I'm so and so, and I'm from China, and then when they get a notice to appear, when they go to the immigration office, there's a client who was arrested, and the staff there pretty much told her that, if there wasn't for that arrest, we wouldn't know that you exist, that we would arrest you. So it's like all these precautions we're trying to make inside the agency, but still they freeze at that moment, and they don't know how to respond anymore, and they get arrested. But fortunately, all 3 clients were released. It was a collaboration between the immigration attorney and the social service provider to explain to them why is it so dangerous, or why is it so bad if you would deport them. Some have severe DV situations back home, and then 2 of them are actually trafficking victims. And then we were able to work with the immigration attorneys to help them be released. And it's several months that they have to stay in detention, and that puts a lot of strain on their family members. And then also there's we find it lately, like we used to be able to help clients to tell us, like to build trust with clients, to help them tell us like what happened to you, and then to realize, oh my gosh, you have been trafficked. But lately we are hearing more what we realizing like canned stories, like I worked there the first day, and then I got arrested, and then there's more reluctance to tell the counselors what actually happened to them. But later when we learned through like a law enforcement, like a rescue operation, it was a very interesting interview. It's supposed to be confidential unless they are willing to give a statement to the PD. So it was like, actually, I told the police I worked there for a day, but actually I've worked there for a month. And then, it's like in 1 minute, the statement changes so much, because I know if I tell the truth, I'm going to be deported. If I tell the truth, I'm going to be locked up because I'm practicing without a license. And I believe I'm not supposed to live inside the massage parlor, but I have to, and then I'm not allowed to leave that venue. But then I'm afraid to tell the police because my boss tell me that it's illegal to live inside the massage parlor, but then she is so kind to me that she offers me a job, and that she gives me a place to live, though I have to pay rent. So, but then they are not willing to collaborate or to tell the law enforcement of what actually happened to them, and it's becoming harder for them to cooperate. And then a third thing is that we are finding more risk-taking behaviors. Okay, I'm going to be arrested no matter what, either by PD or by ICE. So I'm in survival mode. I need to make money, so whatever. So they just go back, keep on returning, to the at-risk venues. And that's really, really frustrating. That's what's happening.
Mary, can you share any case stories of your clients at their point of arrest, similar to what Susan was talking about? Sorry.
I can't disclose too many details, but I can echo a lot of, at least when they're first arrested, a lot of clients are just confused, right? The part of it is language access. I know that the police have the ability in apps now where they tell us, we actually haven't seen this happen, but they have apps where it's supposed to help them translate. But our clients tell us, they are still confused. They've been detained. They have, oftentimes when they have private attorneys, they're even more confused. They don't know what their charges are. Why are they seeing us in the first place? So a lot of our work as social service providers become, telling them what the intervention court is about, what they're, expected to do, basically, and a lot of it is just really a lot of confusion. And one of the things we've tried to advocate for is just better, not just even, a good interpreter, quote unquote, but somebody who is mindful of the interpretation, someone who's not going to re-stigmatize somebody if they're doing massage. If that interpreter has some, bias against massage workers, they might say something off the cuff, even though they were professionally trained. So these are the things that we really think through, because it's that point of arrest that is either a point of opportunity for police or a point for real traumatization.
Yeah, they're the potential first respondents to encounter human trafficking. So, Leigh, to you, what are some better methods that you've been thinking about, your team been thinking about, that legal aid or Susan and Mary, Womenkind have considered to collaborate with police in terms of finding and rescuing victims?
That's a really, really hard question and something that we've struggled with. We feel very strongly that someone should not be arrested in order to be identified as a trafficking victim. That is just obviously the complete wrong way to go. And there was a lot of advocacy done with a lot of people in this room, with the NYPD and the mayor's office. And in February of 2017, the Vice unit of NYPD announced a change in their policy, that they would stop focusing on doing prostitution arrests, and focus more on buyers and traffickers and exploiters. And we did see a big drop in arrests at that point, and there were a couple of service providers who agreed to go with NYPD. I think Garden of Hope was one of them, where they would go on what they called building operations, which meant that there was some type of building violation in the business, and which entitled them to go out and do a site visit, basically. And they would allow the service provider to speak with individuals who were working in the massage parlor. So, that seemed like a better way. People weren't being arrested, but they were still being somewhat traumatized because they still didn't really understand what was going on. Am I being arrested? Why are the police talking to me? Why are they here? But obviously it was better that people were not arrested. Some of the disconnect, though, is that while this was a policy that they were going to supposedly stop really enforcing or arresting people for prostitution, they were still doing, precincts were still doing operations because of community complaints. So there's that, within one police force, there's still a disconnect of what is the actual policy. So there still are arrests happening in massage parlors and other places throughout the city regarding prostitution. I guess we're working on advocating for decriminalization of prostitution throughout New York State. That's kind of the new approach that we think is the way to better approach the dealing with trafficking. And there are a couple of things in the works that may lead to diversion pre-arrest or pre-prosecution that would take away a piece of the prosecutorial system and leave people without actual arrest. But that's not off the ground yet.
Susan, do you have anything to add on that collaboration between police and Womenkind or Garden of Hope?
That was actually my question to Mary and Leigh, because I haven't really found anything that really worked out so well. Because like going to the venue with the PD, with the uniform and with the badge right here, you kind of like very difficult to build trust already. Right now, we are going on outreach on a befriended basis, but it's so much strenuous than referrals from HTIC because they are not mandated to come into our session, and then you share with them all these different services, and they don't feel, they need it. So we're thinking maybe working with the current client pool and just to help them, maybe, to make them become more aware, what, how they are being exploited, what their rights, because like I mentioned, human trafficking, what is that? It's just, they don't understand. They don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that, as I mentioned, it is a struggle to work with the police on any of these types of efforts. But so what I've been doing more recently, just in life, is stepping back and kind of trying to get a sense of, why are we all here? And that question is what helps build in thinking about how to work with police. Because if we all have the shared goal of trying to stop human trafficking, no one in this room wants human trafficking to exist, right? And if we're all trying to work on that, what are some basics, like foundational things maybe we're missing? So one of the things I was thinking through was, just community building and communication with law enforcement is just, there's so much gap among law enforcement departments themselves and with service providers. So that's something that I think it would be great and more of a truly collaborative solution if we can just sit down and have a real discussion without biases, without judgment, and just try to figure out how we can help each other and help communities without re-traumatizing. And that's really our goal, is to ensure that our clients aren't re-traumatized. And some of those goals don't always translate in other spheres like law enforcement.
Yeah, Leigh, has your team discussed any sort of like pullback, big picture sentiments for the year to come?
I mean, we're obviously going to continue advocating for the clients that do come through the court, and we work really hard to make sure that they get the best possible immigration advice and representation that they can. That's been a real struggle because immigration attorneys are really stretched very thin right now, and they're having to prioritize who is at the highest risk or who's at the highest immediate risk in terms of taking on the representation for clients who may be eligible for immigration relief. So that's a big concern. I think we all struggle with how to identify victims, but as someone on the panel earlier said that, labor trafficking victims rarely get arrested, but they still are able to, get services and identify services to help them. And so I guess we need to do a better job of advertising, that to a broader population for people who are experiencing sex trafficking and, labor trafficking through massage parlors. I kind of had this fantasy in terms of, just the allowing people to know what their rights are, that when planes are coming in from China, that some kind of video is shown to say it's illegal to practice massage in New York State without a license, and don't let anyone tell you that this is a good job and you can make a lot of money and it's safe. Because it's painful to me to see these large numbers of women coming to this country hoping for a better life. They've never been arrested before. They've probably never had any trouble with law enforcement before in their life. It's shaming, and it's scary, and it's just painful to me that, they come here for what they hope is a better life, and they get sucked in to a really traumatizing and exploitive situation.
I mean, before we throw it out to questions, Susan, do you have any case stories you'd like to add before we got any questions going? I'm sorry, I kind of skipped the case stories question.
Case stories about ICE arrest or?
Yeah, any case stories that have stuck with you as of late?
I remember this woman, if we're talking about ICE arrest, that describes how she was trafficked. She has a severe debt from where she came from, to the point her debtors were all gathered around her house, so she's kind of like stuck in her home, and then she can't really go out of the house to actually buy food. And then somehow her friends helped her to escape to come to America, and then she started to living inside what we call, probably you guys are familiar with family style motel, and then she met this big sister, what she called big sister, and who started to teach her the trade and try to persuade her, because she's hearing her always on the phone and being pursued by the people who she owed money to, and then her families in China are also being pursued by those debtors. And so what that big sister said was really vulgar to me. She said that, if it's just you who is being harmed, it's just one person, but now you're troubling your whole family. Now all you have to do is just to open your leg a little bit, and then you could solve all those problems. And then just she's being bombarded with all this persuading and it's like trying to teach her how to do makeup, how to dress up, and and telling her how much money she could make, and to solve the debts that she has, and with all those harassments from her debtor. And then she finally gave in, and then later on she came to QHTIC, and that's when that arrest flagged the immigration, and then she got arrested. So it's like trauma upon trauma, arrest after arrests, so that's a case story of how not only what a human trafficking victim's life looks like, it's also it describes how an immigrant's life looks like in a foreign country. It's like that you have no control. It's just everything is out of your control, and which is very sad. But fortunately, she was able to leave that detention, and yeah, for reasons I'm not able to disclose now. Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add before we throw it out, Mary?
Yeah, I want to add that the people we have seen who have faced levels of especially sex trafficking, there was always there was this kind of common trend of that they went from either a nail business to a massage to a restaurant throughout the 50 states of the U.S. and that they were always promised work that may not have involved sex work. So, and then, you know, there was a lot of this kind of fraud that was happening with them. And then at various points, it's always, especially for the clients we've had for longer term, it's more of, it's interesting in a way because sometimes they have disclosed that, you know, this is something they did voluntarily. And then there were also points where it rose to the level of sex trafficking. And I think that nuance in what's going on, especially around Asian massage parlors, aren't being heard enough. But that is something that clients have disclosed is, you know, they might have provided the sexual service in one massage place, but then in another, they were definitely, you know, full-on trafficked. So that's one of the things that, you know, I do want to paint a fuller picture of.
Right. We will grab the mics. No, sorry. I don't need.
Yeah, hi. Have any of your organizations been targeted at all by organized crime or no?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Have any of your organizations been targeted by organized crime as a result of trying to help people in human trafficking here in New York City?
Well, I can jump in about loan sharks, which, you know, I'm not sure if that really rises to the level of organized crime, at least in the U.S., but some of our clients have disclosed that they had loan sharks back in their home country, and that loan shark was actually, you know, they might have seen, well, they did see one of the associates of that loan shark, like in Queens. So it's kind of more of a widespread issue, but a lot of it stems from loan sharks. But honestly, a lot of the organized crime, we don't hear as much, except when it has something to do with a loan shark in their home country.
Hi. Is it me?
Sorry, Susan, do you want to go ahead?
I have never personally encountered like all the people who are organizing the crime, but from working with FBI, they told us that it's never just this one perpetrator. It's always there's always more people getting involved. So it's not only human trafficking. When you try to assist the client, there are many different crimes that could be involved in. It could be fraud. It could be money laundering, and then commercial sex all together. And then sometimes also identity theft, like they steal credit cards, like in apartment buildings. So it could be all operated by a group of people. So you know, from one victim you encounter, and then from there you just see like a whole bunch of other things that appear other than just trafficking.
Hi. If we took out of the equation ICE and law enforcement and just looked at this segment of the labor market, people working in massage parlors, whether or not sex work sometimes occurs, in terms, what are the needs of this group of people? Is it wages? Is it safety? I'm just curious about the real working conditions if we did remove, these factors, which seem to be very, very pressing.
I think there are certainly labor issues involved. Most clients are not paid by the hour. They are paid often just in whatever tips they receive from clients. And that's also a reason that people sometimes do end up doing sex work, sometimes voluntarily, because that they get to keep the money that they make doing the sex work. And the longer I represented clients working out of massage parlors, the more I did feel like that the labor issues were the strongest piece. But then there are also like work conditions, right, where people are coming in and robbing the massage parlor, or a client is raping them or assaulting them, and they're not getting support, for being the victims of those types of crimes, and because of all the other reasons with, maybe their immigration status or their need to pay back debt or a lack of support at their job, those crimes are not being reported.
And because we do street outreach, other than working inside the venues, for out-of-state cases, you hear a lot of women who actually stay inside the massage parlor, sometimes 24 hours a day. But in Flushing in particular, you see there's what we call a track, and then you see women actually soliciting clients on the street, and then so whether it's very hot or it's very cold weather-wise, you see these women standing there. Originally, they get a lot of criticisms from the community members until we actually started to do outreach to them. Many a times they were actually, it's part of their work. They are sent out to stand there by the boss or the managers. It's mandatory. They have to stand there. So it's really long hours of work just standing there. Sometimes I see them 10 a.m. in the morning, and then when I visit them in the evening, 10, 11, they're still standing there, which is really hard in terms of working condition. And the ventilation, because we go inside the venue, sometimes it's all, like the windows are all closed shut, and then even the workers would say that, when we have food, or we have lunch, we have dinner, the food smells like in there, in that small space. And it's always very small and crowded with dark lights inside. So, and then sometimes they just sleep on the bed, the massage beds. And then, and one story, I haven't really witnessed it, but my client told me that she actually had a blankie and then she slept on the floor in the evenings. So that's their situation. Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked that question, especially on what the needs have been for clients, because it ranges quite a lot besides what's been mentioned. And I'm sure another group following us will be talking a lot about workers' rights. But, I think besides the work environment, there have been other issues going on with clients, pretty much like all of us here in this room. So there's family care needs, there's medical needs. We had one client that was facing chemotherapy. So these are very more of a priority in their lives than, frankly, being arrested in some ways. So just to say in terms of what are the needs, yes, economic needs are still very much there, but what are some very practical realities that they have? And sometimes it's often, medical even.
I do want to mention a little bit about housing. We used to, there are many shelters who are language appropriate for our clientele. And we used to give our rental assistance, but we only had funds for 3 months, which is not enough. And so recently, we have got a grant. So we want to provide a longer term. Let's say if they could stay in our shelter for 3 months, and later on that we could provide them with rental assistance for another 6 months. So they have a longer term to be stabilized. I asked my clients if I could dream with you, because you have, like what Mary said, You know, you have all these medical issues, and you need to be grounded, you know, rather than running around to these different cities in the United States. And then, you know, not even have the time to apply for your immigration status because, you know, that's your right, you're eligible. That if we could offer you more long-term housing, would you want to stay with us and to work on that? And then that's our hope for, you know, for the future years to come. If we used to think that mandated sessions are like just a cup of cold water to these clients, because I know that a lot of them are probably just going to go away from us because it's mandated. But with like more fund and more services, like long-term services, we're hoping to, if not to help all of them, but for those who are willing to stay with us, at least housing and mental health, you know, that we could offer them. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Linda Olican. I'm the Executive Director of the Mayan. And later on, my organization will present on the impact of immigration policies and labor trafficking. I just want to say that many of the things that were, you know, discussed by the panel resonate very strongly with the work of our organization. And as a domestic worker myself, and as a co-founder of this organization, I've been with the Mayan for 16 years. I could feel very strongly how big the work is, you know, to address the problem on human trafficking, especially, you know, labor and sex trafficking. But in our work, we view this as an outcome of a systemic problem. Because we do a lot of services in the Mayan, and at the end of the day, I feel very frustrated. Why? Because no matter how much, you know, work and passion you put in helping victims and survivors, it's very hard to solve it unless we talk about the roots and drivers of trafficking. So the Mayan is trying to address those, right? So Mary has, you know, mentioned about, you know, these workers as being migrant workers, and many of them are women, you know, left their country to find work abroad, and that's the story of our community too. So the United States has a big role in impoverishing the countries of origin of these women, China and the Philippines, right? So us being the United States, we should be very thoughtful about that the oppression of these women and workers originated from countries that were exploited by the United States. So those are the push factors, you know. How do you address those? It's very hard and it will take many years, right? But if you don't address those and you don't educate the victims about the roots of their own trafficking, you know, the global trafficking of migrant workers, the tendency for these traffic workers is to look inward, right? Blame themselves, blame, you know, their traffickers. What about, you know, the bigger systems and structures that really generate conditions for labor trafficking? I think, you know, if we as a movement against trafficking really want to do something about this, we should be drawing bigger circles, looking deeper into the roots and, you know, of this problem.
Can we make that a question for our panelists, I wonder?
May I just continue what I'm trying to say also? But thank you. So someone, I think it was, I don't know, one of the panelists mentioned about control, that these victims and survivors lose control over their lives, right? It's very frustrating, you know. Look at these women, many of them were educated in their countries, right? You know, they had normal lives in their countries. When they came here, became undocumented, went into these very bad, work situations, they lost control of their lives. So in our organization, we're trying to reverse that. And how do we do that? Through organizing. So later in the panel, our group will talk about that because we can do something. We can, empower these women, let them really sort out their lives and look at, midterm, long-term solutions. That can happen if there is solid organizing and bigger coalition work to address this. Thank you.
Just to make that into a question, can we talk a little bit about how your organizations are addressing push factors in your clients' lives?
What does push factors mean?
So the factors that Ms. Awala Khan just described that are pushing women out of their home countries and driving the immigration to the U.S.
Sometimes I hate to say that I don't like sad stories. I want to say that it's all right to go to another country to look for a better life. It doesn't have to be something sad that's happening in your country or something bad that's already happening in your country, therefore you need to go away. I just want to say that first. But then from our clients, a lot of times it's, of course, I mentioned gender-based violence, one-child policy, your body is not your own, and domestic violence, you call police many times, and then, nobody does anything about it. Also, we are hearing stories where clients are saying that, oh my gosh, I feel so free here. When I landed here, and I don't have to be married. I don't have to be a wife. I don't have to have all these roles that's put on me as a woman when I was in China. I feel so free. I didn't know that I could be like this. And then, of course, they are the economic factors also. So it's all these different reasons that are pushing them, as you described, out of China. Many of them say, I didn't plan on staying in America when I first came here on my tourist visa. Then when I landed, I said, oh my gosh, how wonderful this is. And then gradually they decide to stay. And I'm an immigrant myself. I didn't suffer anything terrible in my country, but I still chose I want to come to America. I don't have to suffer anything bad to decide that I want to immigrate to another country. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but my project is a part of a number of coalitions that works toward approaching anti-trafficking work through a human rights approach, and to veer, away from a prosecution approach to ending trafficking, because we see, the underlying pieces as a better way to mitigate the vulnerabilities that people experience, which leads them to being vulnerable to trafficking. So if we can approach, if we can spend more money on giving children better education, or more money in other countries where people are suffering vulnerabilities, that will make people less likely to be trafficked going forward. That's the hope.
And just to add, I think, the push factors are really hard to address once they're actually here. One of the things that we have tried to work on with a government office is kind of what Leigh's fantasy vision was having this video before they even come abroad, where it's like, these are your rights, and here are the service providers that can help you if you should find yourself in trouble. And we actually got a few people calling our helpline as a result, not a significant number. But that's one way I can think of. Otherwise, we'd have to sit here and talk about restructuring an entire government, which that would take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank our panel so much. Super enlightening.